This is Levi Wanamaker from Great American RV, and today we're going to get into detail about tankless hot water heaters.
A tankless hot water heater works very differently compared to the old-style 6 or 10-gallon heaters with a tank. Those were used for years and are still being used by some manufacturers today. The big promise is longer hot showers without waiting for a small tank to recover. But there are also a few things you need to understand so you'll know what to expect. So in this video, I'm going to show you what it is, how it works, how it compares to the older style, and the honest pros and cons. First, let's quickly explain how RV water heaters used to work. They used a small tank-style water heater. Typically, it was a 6 or a 10-gallon tank. That tank would fill up with water, heat that water using propane, electric, or sometimes both. Then it would store that hot water until you were ready to use it. So when you turned on the shower or the sink, you were pulling hot water directly out of that tank. The good part was it was simple and familiar. But there were some downsides. First, you only had a limited amount of hot water. If you had a 6-gallon tank and multiple people needed showers, somebody was probably going to get a cold surprise. Second, once the hot water was gone, you had to wait for the tank to heat up again. This is called recovery time. Third, the tank was heating and storing hot water whether you needed it or not. So even with no plans for using hot water, you could be wasting propane or electricity just keeping the water ready. And anyone who has used one of these knows the sound. You're sitting there in the living room. Nobody is touching a faucet, nobody is in the shower. And suddenly you hear the hot water heater kick on. That doesn't mean your camper is haunted. That's just the tank saying, hey, this water has cooled off a little bit. I'm going to heat it back up again. So the old system worked and a lot of people used it for years, but it definitely had its limitations. Instead of filling up a small tank and keeping the water hot all day, a tankless system heats the water as you use it. So when you turn on the hot water, cold water starts flowing into the system. Once it senses the water, the burner kicks on, and the water gets heated as it passes through the unit. So it travels into the unit cold and exits at the temperature you selected on your control panel. So the big difference is this. A tankless water heater makes hot water on demand. That on-demand part is a big deal. Now, that does not mean hot water magically appears the second you touch the faucet. The water still has to travel from the heater to wherever you are using it. So if the water heater is on one side of the camper and the shower is on the other side, you will still have to wait a few seconds while the hot water gets there. That part has nothing to do with the heater being weak. That's just the plumbing distance. The hot water has to make the trip, it does not teleport. Although if somebody figures that out, RV owners will line up immediately. This is especially nice for families. Beach trips, muddy kids, dogs, longer camping stays, or anyone who just wants to take a normal shower without doing math in their head. And that's the beauty of it. Tankless takes away a lot of the hurry up before the hot water runs out feeling. You still have to be smart with your fresh water. And your gray tank does not magically become unlimited. So if you're dry camping, make sure you pay attention to water usage. But from a hot water standpoint, the experience is much closer to what you are used to at home. This is why so many manufacturers have moved in this direction. Now let's talk about what people do wrong. Because a tankless water heater is a little different than what some people are used to. First, turn the hot water on with enough flow that the system knows that you are ready for hot water. These systems are designed to sense water moving. So if you barely crack the faucet open, the water heater may not always fire the way you expect. They are not built for a tiny trickle. It wants a real request. Also, try not to constantly turn the shower off and on every few seconds. Longtime RV owners are used to doing that because they were trying to save the hot water in the old tank system. But with a tankless system, every time you shut the water off, the system will stop heating. Then when you turn it back on, it has to sense the flow and start the process all over again. This can create small temperature changes. Not the end of the world, but it can affect how the shower feels.
This is what your controller will look like. It'll look similar to this depending on your brand. When you turn it on, the number will light up. You set that number to whatever your shower temperature is. You'll have some trial and error in the beginning. So let's just say you take a temperature of 120 or 105, whatever the case may be. That's your temperature from now on whenever you get in the shower.
Now let's talk about propane. This is the part where a lot of people get nervous. They hear that a tankless hot water heater runs strictly on propane, and all of a sudden, the propane tank on the front of their camper becomes something a lot scarier. The thought of having to fill it every time you go camping can be terrifying. But the math is not nearly as bad as people think. It is actually extremely efficient. The important part to remember is that it is not sitting there all day, keeping water hot just in case it's needed randomly throughout the day. Think of the old style as making a pot of coffee in the morning, and then leaving it on the burner all day, just in case you decide to have an afternoon cup. This is more like a Keurig. One is trying its best to stay ready regardless of how much that cost you in energy. The other one works only when you need it. Now let's give you some real-world numbers. Let's start with a standard grill-size propane tank like you would have at home. It has about 4.6 gallons of propane when full. Then we'll take an above-average tankless hot water heater, let's say 55,000 BTUs. Propane has about 91,500 BTUs per gallon. So that tank holds roughly 420,000 BTUs total. So if that 55,000 BTU water heater ran wide open for a full hour, it would use a little over half a gallon of propane. So that tank would give you roughly 45 10-minute showers before you emptied it. And since most campers have 2 tanks, that's 90 10-minute showers. And again, that's with the system running on full volume. And most people could not even take that level of hot water for a minute, much less 10. So you will not be using the system at full volume. So unless you are setting up a public shower for the entire weekend at a music festival, trust me when I tell you you'll have enough propane.
And that's the beauty of a tankless hot water heater. It's not magic, but if you follow the tips in this video, it will feel less like a chore and more like home, and you just may enjoy your camping trip a little more.